Hi, I'm Susan with Virginia Beach Public Library. In this video, I'm going to walk you through how to make both of these cardboard looms. For this project, you will need a piece of cardboard. You can source this from any packaging box. You'll also need a ruler, scissors, and a pen or pencil. So the first step is to take your cardboard and find a straight edge that I, of course, turned away from. And I'm going to measure 2 inches by 3 inches. Now, taking our scissors and just cut along that line. And it's okay if you cut slightly beyond the line. The rest of it will just kind of become scrap, or you can also save it to make additional little looms. And it's okay if the edges are a little bit rough. It doesn't need to be completely straight. So the next step is going to be to add the notches like in this one, and that's just where the warping thread will sit. For mine, I like to do about every 1/4 inch. So there's 1/4, 1/2, 3/4. And again, it doesn't need to be exact. It's crafted very forgiving, which is always nice. And now flip it over, and we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So a notch every 1/4 inch. So now I'm going to take my scissors and the loom and just snip each one of those marks that I made. And it doesn't need to be a really deep cut. This is a basic cardboard loom. You could immediately start applying the warp thread, or like with this one, you can add a couple little lifts, which is what a good use of the scrap is. And for this, you can kind of just eyeball it. And to add this, you can just take a little bit of glue and apply it on the underside and place it down. Do the same thing with the other side. And each time that you place it, you'll want to hold it for about 30 to 45 seconds. And then you can use something like washi tape or masking tape to hold it in place while it dries. Once it's done, you can remove the tape or the binder clips if you've used those, or paper clips, and you should have just these little lifts, and that just makes it easier to get underneath each of the warping threads. And that's how you make a cardboard loom. Now I'm going to walk you through how to warp the thread on the cardboard loom. So for this project, you will need your cardboard loom, some warping thread that can be bought at most of the major craft stores. A lot of different places will sell it, and a pair of scissors. So the first step is to cut a length of it, and this is actually going to be too long for what I need, but that's okay. So you're going to take it, and I like to make a double knot. So wrap it around. Nope, come on, thread. And wrap it around again. And it makes a slightly bigger knot, but it's also a sturdier knot. So now we're going to take our loom, and from the back side, we are going to slide that through the first notch so that the knot is resting against it. And if your top thread is too long, you can always tuck it into the top or just leave it there. And the next part of warping. So now that we've got the knot situated in the back, we're going to flip it back over and not really stretch, but slide the thread up through the top. And it should be kind of taut. Wrap it around that tab and through the next notch. Sometimes I'll use my nail if I'm having trouble like keeping it in place to get it through. And you can also adjust it down. So, getting that out of the way. Down to the next one. Around. Oh. And if it slides out, just go back and do it again. So again, wrapping it around. And then when you get to the last notch, you can slot it in. And then I usually leave at least a little bit of extra thread, so I'll stretch it along the back and sort of notch it back into that top. Take my scissors and trim it. And because it will distract me to have this thread loose, I also settled that one at the top. And now you have warped your loom and are ready to start weaving. So now that you have made your cardboard loom and added the warping thread, we are going to move on to the next step of actually weaving on it. So for this step, you will need your looms or loom, some yarn, and thicker yarn will weave a lot faster. It's just like if you were using like hemp cord to make a bracelet. The thinner it is, the longer it takes, and the thicker it is, the faster it'll go. You'll also need a fork. Yes, I said a fork. And if you would like, you can also use a yarn needle to help weave through the warp threads, or you can also make one by taking just a little piece of cardboard. So we're going to do that, setting my other stuff aside. So I usually take a little rectangle of cardboard. If I've got some scraps left over, I'll use those usually. And I don't even really measure it. I mostly cut sort of a rough triangle shape. And I like to keep kind of rounded edges on it just so that it's not like too sharp. And at the larger, so the one thing I do is keep it thinner at one end and wider at the other. And at the wider end, make another snip, just like I was going to make a notch on a loom, making sure that it did its thing. And the nice thing about this is that then you can always take your yarn and slide it into that notch, which I will say is much, much easier for me at least than using the large-eyed yarn needles, which can be kind of fickle sometimes. So once you have your needle and thread and the loom, all you're going to do is lift up, go under one, over the next, lift the next one up, slide under there, lift the next one up, go over the next one, lift the next one. And once you've gone under and over each one, you can actually pull the yarn all the way through. And I would say leave about a 1/2 inch tail at the end. And then you will just take the needle and yarn, and you're going to do the reverse. So for this one, I went underneath it, so now I'm going to go over it Next one, I'm going to go under it and over it and under it, over, under, oh. And if it falls off, all you have to do is slide it right back in. And so this one was an under, so it's going to be an over. Under and over, and this time it's going to hang on. And one of the important steps is not to pull it through too tightly, or it will start to pull your threads in and you will end up with sort of a wonky final product. Now with this sample, you can see that there are a lot of gaps between the rows of weaving, and that's where your trusty fork will come in to play. So all you'll do is take the fork and push it down, and it helps to compact all of those rows so that you end up with a much tighter weave. And if you find that there's too much space, you can also, like I did, pull one thread over and then just fix it row by row. Again, not too tight, but not necessarily loose either. And then you'll just keep going back and forth like that all the way across. And if you're using one of the looms that has the lifts on it, grab one more yarn. So just go back over there. So sliding my yarn back into that notch. And this is why the lifts can be really helpful, is that it's much easier to get underneath all of those threads. So we'll go under, over, under, over, under, over, under, and over. And again, leaving that tail at the bottom. You can also use the fork each row. And the other benefit of the lifts is that it does give you this really nice edge at the bottom to sort of push the yarn against to keep it all together. So once you have woven enough that you are satisfied with the size of the weaving that you've done, you are going to finish it off. So there are a lot of different ways to kind of finish it. The best one that I've seen is to flip it over, and we're going to slide this off. And this is also where that fork comes in handy. Slip it under and off, off. Now there's a planet where this works. There we go. And then you'll just take each thread and just pull it up ever so gently so that it kind of meets the bottom there. And then from here it gets much easier because you just pop it off the next tab and do the same thing. Slide it down. Pull it taut. If your patch gets any of these really tight spots, that's where you can take either the fork or the needle and just kind of loosen one side of it. And that helps even it out a lot. And if anything comes loose like this, don't worry about it, because when you go to tighten that spot, it'll catch any of those loose edges. I've also seen small weaves that people have done where they have left a lot of frayed edges like this, where they just slide it one way straight across each time. So now that it is off of the loom, I'm going to tighten up this edge a little bit, but not too much. And finding this knot here. So there's one little one right there. And I'm going to take the end and we're going to slide that end through. Don't forget to trim off the front edge that you were weaving with, because we don't need it flying all over the place. And once you've gotten it off the loom, you can see that if you tug it just a little bit, it helps even out some of it. And trim that piece. If you still have the needle on the end of your thread, you can also use that to do the double knot that keeps it a little more secure. And whoops. Do the same thing with the other edge. Sort of pull this a little bit loose. And so slide it through and move that so that it stays in place over there. And do it one more time. And then just pull it until it tightens into its little knot. Go. And there you have your very first weave. And you can do these in any different sizes. You can make the loom bigger to make a mug rug for different mugs to sit on. So this is a larger one that I did, and you can see where there's some wonky spots. This is an example of what happens if you pull your yarn too tightly while you're weaving. So I was getting progressively tighter and then loosened it up, which is why it flares back out. You could also make a much longer one and wrap it around a mug, so then you have a reusable mug cozy. But you could also sew these onto clothing to make it like fun and funky. There are a bunch of different uses for weavings. They can also be decorative on your wall. I've seen people take sticks and literally just hang them up. And we hope that you enjoyed the series, and we can't wait to see what you make. Thanks for watching.